They call it tradition, a rite of passage. But sometimes what happens inside the US military looks a lot like ritualistic madness. We're not talking about basic training push-ups. We're talking about the secret ceremonies, the bizarre uniforms, and the initiation rituals that separate the civilian from the soldier, or maybe just the sane from the ridiculous. From the Navy's infamous Shellback ceremony to the blood pinning that defines some brotherhoods, this video will take you deep inside the most outlandish and often shocking traditions the US military tries to keep hidden. Is it heritage, or just authorized hazing? Stick around and you decide. It's the dark side of brotherhood, the rituals passed down through generations, often kept secret from the public. They tell us these traditions are essential for morale, for forging that unbreakable bond between brothers and sisters in arms. But step behind the polished parades and the immaculate uniforms, and you find something far stranger, far more intense. The line between heritage, a dignified tribute to the past, and something we might call hazing is blurred, perhaps deliberately so, in the modern United States military. This video is about that line and what happens when it's crossed. We're not here to talk about the usual boot camp struggles, the long runs, or the endless push-ups that every civilian expects. Those are just training. We are diving into the ceremonies that truly test and sometimes shock the individual soldier, sailor, or marine. These are the practices that separate the military world from the civilian one in a way that is utterly confusing to outsiders. Prepare to go deep inside the most outlandish, the most controversial rites of passage currently active in the U.S. Armed Forces, rites they often deny even exist. Every branch of the U.S. military, from the stoic Army to the globe-trotting Navy, has developed its own folklore, a language of initiation and exclusion. These traditions are designed to make you feel like you've earned your spot, that you belong to something greater and more unique than any civilian organization. But the price of that exclusivity, that sense of belonging, can be shockingly high. It often involves enduring symbolic humiliation, bizarre role-playing, and, in some rare but unforgettable cases, physical discomfort that pushes the very limits of discipline. Our journey starts by examining the traditions that are merely strange, the pomp, the ridiculous uniforms, the symbolic acts that defy logic but are harmless fun. We'll look at the soldiers who dress like they stepped out of the 18th century, performing elaborate, almost theatrical routines. But don't get too comfortable, because that is just the warm-up. We must first establish what counts as weird before we can tackle what many consider actively dangerous. The ultimate question driving this entire video is the one posed in our title. Are these powerful rituals necessary heritage, or are they simply authorized hazing disguised by years of history? Pause. To answer that, we must first understand the fundamental need for ritual in a military context, the purpose they serve in the human psyche before a conflict. Our next section will explore the acceptable ceremonial traditions that set the tone, before we plunge into the infamous world of shellbacks and the controversial practice known as blood pinning. Every single military organization, across history and every continent, has developed unique, non-tactical rituals, and for good reason. They act as essential psychological markers, clearly separating the civilian identity you once had from the warrior identity you must now assume. These ceremonial acts create a shared experience, a collective memory that says, "We went through this together," which is the bedrock of unit cohesion and trust in combat. Before we look at the bizarre extremes, we have to acknowledge the vital role that simple, unifying ceremonies play in forging an effective fighting force. Sometimes the weirdest aspect of military life is purely visual, rooted in centuries of slow-moving fashion. Think of the elaborate, often impractical ceremonial uniforms worn by specialized units, like the Army's 3rd Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, famous for their precise, nearly robotic movements. These uniforms aren't practical for a modern battlefield, but their very existence emphasizes history, demanding respect and projecting an image of unwavering discipline to the public. The strangeness here lies in the commitment to antiquated pomp, not in any physical discomfort or moral debate. There are countless other formalized traditions that are strange yet benign, designed primarily for morale and history. The Navy and Marine Corps often hold highly formal dining in or dining out events, featuring intricate rules of order and the infamous grog bowl, a communal concoction that looks and tastes like something you syrup off a ship deck. These events are goofy, sometimes embarrassing, but strictly regulated to be a light-hearted test of endurance and adherence to custom. They are the traditions that most clearly fit the label of heritage. These acts, whether it's wearing a plume or struggling through a toast, reinforce the single most important asset a military unit possesses: its shared identity. They transform a random collection of individuals into a tightly knit brotherhood. However, this powerful need for belonging is also the precise mechanism that can be exploited and pushed into something far more questionable. It's what allows some traditions to slip from goofy to cruel, all in the name of group membership. The traditions we just discussed are mostly above board and generally sanctioned by higher command. But now we must address the other kind, the rituals whispered about in the barracks, the ones that thrive in the shadows of official documentation. Our focus shifts next to the maritime rite that, for centuries, has tested the will and the stomach of every sailor who crosses the equator, a rite that perfectly illustrates the fine line between playful test and legitimate torture. Few traditions are as enduringly bizarre as the use of live mascots, and none are more famous than the goat of the U.S. Naval Academy. The first animal mascot was allegedly captured during the Spanish-American War, and since then, a long line of white goats has served as the living symbol of the midshipman. Named Bill and always wearing a coat of blue and gold, the animal is treated with the respect and pomp usually reserved for a high-ranking officer, often leading the team onto the field at the annual Army-Navy game. While the use of goats originates from older British and Allied naval units, the continued tradition at Annapolis emphasizes the historical tie to the sea and the rugged, sometimes nonsensical spirit of the Navy. It's a whimsical nod to an agrarian past, existing awkwardly in the high-tech reality of modern warfare. Midshipmen are entrusted with their care, ensuring Bill remains in pristine condition, a duty that itself serves as a strange yet structured rite of responsibility. Contrast the solemn care of a goat mascot with the intensity of combat training. It's a stark reminder that military life is a spectrum of duties, some deadly serious and others purely ceremonial. This strange juxtaposition of high-tech weaponry and ancient ritual is a signature characteristic of the U.S. military culture. It reveals a deep-seated human need for symbols, for something tangible and irrational to anchor the intense rationalism of modern warfare. Beyond the goats and the polished parades, even simple objects take on strange power. The Air Force's Mustache March, where airmen are encouraged to grow the most ridiculous and excessive facial hair possible for a month, is another example of a sanctioned silly tradition. It is an authorized release valve for the pressure of regulation, a temporary visual rebellion that is quickly shaved away when the month ends. This kind of controlled, temporary bizarria is key to maintaining morale. We've established the light-hearted extremes, the customs that are weird but unequivocally harmless. But there are other traditions that shed the fun and embrace the brutal, where symbolic discomfort becomes very real. Next, we confront the legendary rite where thousands of sailors have been subjected to a mock trial and a physical endurance test that has been called the single most bizarre and unpleasant experience of their naval careers, the Shellback ceremony. Perhaps no ritual in the U.S. Navy is more famous or infamous than the elaborate ceremony of crossing the line, transforming a Pollywog, one who hasn't crossed the equator, into a seasoned Shellback. This rite dates back centuries, blending nautical superstition with a desire to test a new sailor's fortitude and sense of humor. It is a day-long theatrical performance where seasoned sailors, often dressed in bizarre costumes as King Neptune and his court, hold a mock trial for the uninitiated, setting the stage for the physical rites that follow. The ceremony itself involves a series of physical challenges and acts of controlled public humiliation, all administered by the Shellbacks. Polywogs are subjected to a variety of messy and sometimes painful experiences, crawling through garbage, being covered in grotesque sauces and grog, and being forced to kiss the royal babies, a sailor in costume, belly. Though regulations mandate no lasting injury, the sheer psychological and physical discomfort pushes many to their breaking point, all while being judged by their peers and superior officers. The Navy officially views the Shellback ceremony as a historical rite, a bonding experience that creates a shared, unforgettable memory and promotes unit cohesion. It's supposed to be a humorous welcome into the elite global fraternity of those who have crossed the equator. However, the fine print is always changing. The Navy repeatedly updates its rules to curb excessive behavior, a clear indication that the practice frequently teeters on the edge of unauthorized hazing, forcing commanders to intervene. The controversy lies in the inherent permission structure. Commanders authorize the ceremony, but individual sailors often push the boundaries, using the cover of tradition to exert power or enact petty revenge. The key distinction often lies in intent and outcome. Is the discomfort purely symbolic, or is it designed to genuinely inflict pain? When a sailor is forced to crawl through several feet of food waste and oil, the question of whether it's simulated becomes moot. The debate over the Shellback ceremony perfectly encapsulates the conflict at the heart of military tradition, the need for belonging versus the risk of abuse. If a command allows controlled hazing for a good cause, where does the individual soldier or marine learn where the actual hard line is? That line becomes even harder to find when the ritual isn't officially sanctioned at all, but takes place in the dark corner of a barracks, fueled by the desire for true and painful brotherhood. The grog bowl is a centerpiece of both the Navy and Air Force formal dining and ceremonies, and while less physically intense than a shellback trial, it is infinitely more disgusting. The bowl is a large punch container filled with a mixture of symbolic ingredients, each one meant to represent a major event or failure in the unit's history. Historically, this could mean mixing stagnant water, old coffee, Tabasco sauce, and dirt, creating a vile, chunky sludge designed to punish those who break the rigorous ceremonial rules. If a service member commits a minor breach of etiquette during the formal dinner, anything from talking out of turn to using the wrong fork, they are summarily dragged to the grog bowl by the president of the mess. Their punishment is to drink a large cup of the concoction while the entire room watches. It is a highly formal yet deeply humiliating ritual designed to enforce discipline through public mockery, which is a powerful psychological tool in a group setting. The grog bowl serves a dual purpose. It punishes the disorderly, but it also elevates the unit's history and commitment to rules. By forcing the offender to ingest the physical history of the unit's mistakes, the tradition emphasizes the seriousness of their current conduct. It's a prime example of a ritual that is entirely bizarre to an outsider, a formal military event culminating in someone drinking trash, but which is considered a bonding, if unpleasant, experience by those involved. While consuming the grog bowl is certainly strange, it fits neatly into the heritage side of our core question. It is sanctioned, controlled, and its purpose is disciplinary, not malicious. Yet the fact that military members voluntarily participate in a ceremony designed to humiliate them in front of their peers speaks volumes about the value they place on tradition and group acceptance. The desire to belong is often stronger than the desire for comfort. The grog bowl is where the discomfort is symbolic and the violation is a broken rule. But what about the rituals where the discomfort is real and the violation is a desire to create a painful memory that is strictly forbidden? We now leave the realm of authorized weirdness for the dangerous underground rites of passage that persist despite official military bans, focused on the pain that defines a brotherhood. The most shocking and enduringly controversial rite involves the practice known as blood pinning or blood wings, a non-sanctioned tradition passed down unofficially in certain specialized units, particularly in the airborne and special forces communities. This is where the term hazing finds its starkest definition, as it involves deliberate, self-inflicted physical pain. The tradition claims that for a new member to truly earn their insignia, be it jump wings or special operations badges, the pin must be driven into the skin of the chest until blood is drawn. The rationale behind these ceremonies is steeped in the ancient warrior belief that blood creates an unbreakable bond, a brotherhood forged in shared pain, and a personal sacrifice to the unit. The sight of blood is meant to symbolize the earning of one's place, the price of admission into a truly elite fraternity. It is an intense, private ceremony that bypasses official channels, directly challenging the military's top-down structure with a raw, primal ritual that prioritizes unit loyalty above all else. The U.S. military has explicitly and repeatedly banned these types of rituals, categorizing them strictly as hazing due to the physical danger and emotional abuse involved. Yet the practice continues in the shadows, fueled by the same secrecy that makes these units effective in combat. The risk is clear: infection, scarring, and the potential for severe escalation. When a practice is underground, there are no rules to limit the intensity, making it far more dangerous than the regulated shellback ceremony. The blood pinning is the ultimate test case for our title's question. For those who participate, it is the peak of heritage, the ultimate commitment to the unit. For the military justice system, it is a clear-cut case of criminal hazing, punishable by discipline and discharge. This extreme polarization reveals that tradition is a subjective label, meaning one thing to the people in charge and something completely different to the young soldiers looking for a deeper, more permanent sense of belonging. These practices persist because they are rooted in the human desire to overcome, to prove worthiness through suffering, a concept that resonates deeply with the warrior ethos. The most important takeaway from these dark rituals is not the pain itself, but the power of the secret, the shared knowledge that binds the unit tighter than any official oath ever could. We've explored the full spectrum of strange military traditions, from the harmlessly bizarre uniforms and mascots to the controversial line-crossing ceremonies and the dark banned practice of blood pinning. The complexity lies in recognizing that nearly all these rituals spring from the same root: the desperate need for unit identity and the rapid psychological transformation of the individual. It is a complex legacy, one where humor, history, and brutality often intermingle without clear distinction, making easy judgment impossible. So where do we land on the question? Hazing or heritage? The answer is clearly both and neither. The rituals that are openly sanctioned, like the grog bowl or the bizarre marching uniforms, fall safely under the banner of heritage, though they remain strange. But any practice that involves coercion, physical harm, or humiliation beyond a controlled and mutually accepted threshold tips immediately into the territory of hazing, regardless of how ancient the custom may be. The military will always have its rituals. The human psyche requires them to process the extreme conditions of combat and duty. Whether they involve a ceremonial dip in the ocean or simply the shared experience of misery, they serve to break down the individual and rebuild them as part of a collective. The key challenge for modern leadership is to preserve the bonding power of these traditions while systematically eliminating the abusive elements that actively tear down the individual and threaten the unit's moral integrity. The traditions discussed here are only a small sample of the incredible folklore that exists across the various branches and specialized units. But they open a vital discussion about discipline, leadership, and the limits of unit loyalty. The line between a proud, earned tradition and an act of simple cruelty will always be tested by the individuals on the ground, making the debate over military rights a perpetual and necessary one. We want to hear from you. Especially if you served. What was the strangest tradition you witnessed or participated in? Was it hazing, or was it a cherished heritage? Let us know in the comments below. Which of these rituals should be preserved, and which ones should be retired forever? And if you want to see more deep dives into the military's secret culture, hit that subscribe button